The summer air hung sweet and heavy as the annual church picnic at Grace Community Fellowship drew to a close. I remember it so vividly. The checkered tablecloths dotted with remnants of potato salad and lemonade stains, children chasing each other across the lawn as parents packed up folding chairs, and the golden afternoon light casting long shadows across the church grounds. I'm Sarah, and I've been attending this church since I was a little girl, following in the footsteps of my deeply religious parents who served as pillars of this tight-knit community. At 23, I was now teaching Sunday school and helping organize events like this picnic, always the dutiful daughter everyone expected me to be. And then there was Michael. He'd moved to our small town just 6 months ago, quickly becoming involved in the church's music ministry with his soulful guitar playing and warm tenor voice. With kind eyes that crinkled at the corners when he smiled and an easy laugh that made everyone feel instantly comfortable, he'd become a favorite among the congregation. I noticed him immediately, of course, who wouldn't? But I tried to ignore the flutter in my stomach whenever he was near. Those feelings weren't part of the plan my family had always outlined for me. The picnic had been particularly challenging that day. My mother had invited the Hendersons and their son Thomas, making her intentions painfully obvious with every not-so-subtle comment about what a nice Christian boy he was and how he was looking to settle down soon. I'd smiled politely through it all, nodding at appropriate intervals while stealing glances at Michael across the lawn as he helped the youth group with their three-legged race. The weight of expectations pressed down on me like the humidity in the air, suffocating and inescapable. Let me explain why this matters. In our community, the path was clear. Grow up, find a nice Christian man from the church, marry young, have children, and raise them in the faith. Deviations weren't discussed, and questions about this trajectory were met with gentle but firm correction. I'd never openly challenged this future, but inside, a quiet rebellion had been brewing for years, growing stronger with each passing Sunday. As the picnic wound down and families began to disperse, I felt the familiar tightness in my chest that often preceded my anxiety attacks. The constant performance of being the person everyone wanted me to be had become exhausting. I needed air, space, silence. Making a quick excuse about helping with cleanup, I slipped away from my parents and headed toward the fellowship hall, circling around to the back where a small garden with a stone bench offered solitude. The sounds of the picnic faded as I rounded the corner of the building. Back here, the air was cooler, scented with the honeysuckle that climbed the wooden trellis. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath, finally allowing my shoulders to drop and my carefully maintained smile to fall. This was the only place I could truly be myself, away from the watchful eyes of the congregation and the expectations of my family. Looks like I'm not the only one who needed an escape. The voice startled me, and I turned to find Michael standing a few feet away, his hands in his pockets and an apologetic smile on his face. Sorry, I didn't mean to intrude. I can go if you want to be alone. My heart raced as I shook my head. No, it's okay. I just needed a moment away from. I gestured vaguely toward the picnic area, unable to articulate the complex web of feelings that had driven me to seek solitude. From all the matchmaking, he asked with a knowing smile, taking a tentative step closer. I noticed Mrs. Henderson's son hasn't left your side all afternoon. I felt my cheeks flush with embarrassment. That obvious, huh? Only to someone who's been watching, he replied, and something in his tone made me look up and meet his gaze. There was an intensity there I hadn't seen before, a vulnerability that mirrored my own. The fellowship hall cast long shadows across the garden as the sun began its descent, creating a private world just for us. Michael moved closer, leaning against the wall beside me. Can I tell you something I've never told anyone here? He asked, his voice dropping to nearly a whisper. I nodded, suddenly aware of how close we were standing, how I could smell the faint scent of his cologne mingled with the summer air. I didn't move here just for the job opportunity like I told everyone, he began, looking down at his hands. I was actually running away from my last church. There was an incident. I got close to someone there, another man in the worship team. When people found out, it wasn't pretty. My family suggested a fresh start somewhere new, somewhere I could, he made air quotes, get back on the right path. The confession hung in the air between us, heavy with implication. I found myself holding my breath, my mind racing to process what he was sharing. This wasn't just idle conversation. This was Michael trusting me with something that could potentially ostracize him from our community. Why are you telling me this? I finally asked, my voice barely audible. He looked up then, his eyes searching mine. Because I've seen the way you look at me when you think no one's watching. And because I've seen the same look in my own eyes in the mirror. He paused, taking a deep breath. And because I think maybe you understand what it's like to live behind a mask. The world seemed to still around us as his words sank in. All the feelings I'd been suppressing, not just about Michael, but about myself, about who I was and what I wanted, suddenly demanded acknowledgement. My hands trembled slightly as I processed the truth in what he was saying. I've never, I started, then stopped, unsure how to continue. I've never let myself think about it too much. About why I've never been interested in the nice boys my mother introduces me to. About why I always felt different. The admission felt both terrifying and liberating, like stepping off a cliff and finding wings. Michael nodded, understanding filling his expression. It's scary, isn't it? Especially here, especially with people who love you but might not understand this part of you. How do you do it? I asked. How do you reconcile who you are with what we're taught? With what everyone expects? He was quiet for a moment, considering. I believe God made me exactly as I am, Sarah. And I don't think he makes mistakes. It took me years of prayer and struggle to come to that understanding, but once I did, I found peace with myself. The harder part is finding peace with others who don't see it that way. A child's laughter floated over from the distant picnic area, a reminder of the world that continued to exist beyond our private conversation. I thought about my Sunday school students, about the lessons I taught them about God's love being unconditional. Had I truly believed that applied to me too? I've spent so long trying to be the perfect daughter, the perfect church member. I confessed. I don't know who I am outside of those roles. I don't know if I'm brave enough to find out. Michael took another step closer, closing the gap between us until we were standing just inches apart. You're braver than you think, he said softly. You're here, having this conversation. That's a start. The air between us seemed charged with possibility. I was acutely aware of every detail. The way the setting sun caught in his hair, the gentle rise and fall of his chest as he breathed, the way his eyes never left mine. In that moment, all the teachings and warnings I'd grown up with seemed distant and muted compared to the immediate truth of how I felt standing there with him. What happens now? I whispered, afraid to break the spell between us, but equally afraid of what might happen if I didn't. That depends, he replied, his voice equally soft. What do you want to happen? It was such a simple question, but no one had ever really asked me that before, what I wanted, separate from what was expected of me. I took a moment to truly consider it, to listen to the voice inside that I'd been silencing for so long. I want to be honest, I finally said. With myself, at least. And maybe, with you. My heart pounded so hard I was certain he could hear it. Michael smiled then, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. Slowly, giving me every opportunity to pull away, he reached out and took my hand in his. His touch was warm and solid, anchoring me in the moment. Honesty is a good place to start, he said, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of my hand. The simple gesture sent shivers up my arm. We stood like that for what felt like both an eternity and no time at all, connected by our joined hands and shared vulnerability. The world beyond our little garden continued. I could hear car doors slamming as the last families departed, the clatter of cleanup in the distance, but it felt separate from us, as if we existed in our own pocket of time. Sarah? My mother's voice called from around the front of the building, shattering the moment. Where are you, honey? We're ready to go. Michael and I exchanged a look of mutual understanding. The real world was calling us back, demanding we resume our roles. But something had fundamentally changed. A door had been opened that couldn't be closed again. I should go, I said reluctantly, though I made no move to release his hand. Me too, he agreed, equally stationary. In a moment of courage, or perhaps madness, I leaned forward and pressed a quick, soft kiss to his cheek. Thank you, I whispered, for finding me. His expression was a mixture of surprise and something deeper, more profound. I'll always find you, he promised, finally releasing my hand as my mother's voice called out again, closer this time. We separated, me heading toward the front of the building and Michael staying behind to give us some distance. As I rounded the corner, Composing my features into the mask of the dutiful daughter once more, I felt lighter somehow. The weight of pretense hadn't disappeared, but it had shifted, become more bearable with the knowledge that I wasn't carrying it alone anymore. My mother was standing by our car, her brow furrowed with mild concern. "There you are? What were you doing back there?" "Just getting some quiet," I replied, the half-truth coming easily. "It was a busy day." She nodded, accepting this without question as we got into the car. My father was already in the driver's seat, discussing next week's sermon with my younger brother. Normal. Everything looked so normal from the outside, while inside, I felt transformed. As we pulled away from the church, I looked back and saw Michael emerging from behind the fellowship hall, his eyes finding mine through the car window. No one else would have noticed the slight nod he gave me, or the way his lips curved into a private smile meant only for me. But I saw it, and I held it close, a secret flame to light the way forward. The days that followed were a delicate dance of stolen moments and careful conversations. Michael and I found reasons to volunteer for the same church activities, to arrive early for choir practice, to linger after youth group meetings. Each interaction was charged with the knowledge of what had passed between us behind the fellowship hall, each glance carrying the weight of unspoken understanding. We were cautious, of course. In a community as close-knit as ours, rumors spread faster than the gospel itself. But in those careful encounters, I began to discover parts of myself I'd never allowed to surface. I learned that I loved the sound of Michael's laugh when he wasn't performing it for others, that I had opinions about theology that didn't always align with what I'd been taught, that I could feel both fear and exhilaration in equal measure when our hands accidentally brushed while passing the hymn books. 2 weeks after the picnic, we found ourselves alone in the church library, reorganizing books that had been donated for the annual charity drive. The room was small, lined with shelves of theological texts and Christian fiction, with a single window that cast squares of sunlight across the worn carpet. It was the first time we'd been truly alone since our conversation in the garden. "I've been thinking about what you said," I began, shelving a worn copy of Mere Christianity as Michael sorted through a box of children's Bibles. "About God making you exactly as you are." He looked up, his expression open and attentive. "And I think I believe that too," I said, the words feeling both foreign and right on my tongue. "But I'm still scared of what it means. For my family, for my place here, for my future." Michael set down the book he was holding and moved closer, checking first to ensure the door was closed. "Fear is natural," he said gently. "This isn't an easy path in communities like ours. But living a life that isn't authentic, that's its own kind of pain. How did you find the courage?" I asked, genuinely curious. "To accept yourself, even knowing what it might cost." He considered this for a moment, leaning against the bookshelf beside me. "It wasn't one big moment of courage," he explained. "It was thousands of tiny choices, day after day, to be honest with myself. And eventually, those choices built something stronger than the fear." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. Wasn't that what I was doing now? Making small choices toward honesty, toward authenticity? "Can I ask you something personal?" Michael ventured, his voice soft in the quiet of the library. "Of course. Have you ever been with anyone? I mean, has there ever been someone who made you question everything?" The question caught me off guard, not because it was inappropriate, but because it forced me to confront something I'd been avoiding. "No," I admitted. "I've dated a few guys from church, the ones my parents approved of, but I never felt anything real. I always thought maybe there was something wrong with me, that I wasn't capable of those feelings." "And now?" he asked, his eyes never leaving mine. The air between us seemed to thicken with unspoken possibility. "Now I think maybe I was looking in the wrong places," I whispered. Michael's hand found mine among the books, our fingers intertwining in the shadows of the shelf. This touch felt different from the one in the garden, more intentional, more certain. "Sarah," he began, my name a prayer on his lips. Whatever he might have said next was interrupted by the library door swinging open. We jumped apart as Mrs. Patterson, the church secretary, bustled in with another box of donations. "Oh, you two are still at it. Bless your hearts for taking on this project," she chirped, oblivious to the moment she'd interrupted. "The pastor was wondering if you might help set up for Wednesday night service when you're done here." We both nodded and smiled, slipping back into our public personas with practiced ease. But as Mrs. Patterson left, Michael caught my eye and mouthed later, with a small smile that carried a world of promise. That evening, I sat at my bedroom desk, journal open before me, trying to make sense of the emotions swirling through me. I'd been raised to believe that certain feelings were sinful, that certain paths were closed to good Christians. But I'd also been taught that God was love, that His grace was sufficient, that He knew our hearts better than we knew them ourselves. My phone buzzed with a text message. Walk in the park tomorrow? 3 p.m. by the lake. Michael. My heart raced as I typed back a simple yes. That night, I prayed more honestly than I ever had before. Not for these feelings to go away, as I might have done in the past, but for guidance on how to navigate them with integrity and courage. For the first time in years, my prayers felt like a real conversation rather than a recitation of expected words. The next day dawned bright and clear, a perfect late summer afternoon. I told my parents I was meeting friends to discuss the upcoming fall festival, another half-truth in the growing collection I was accumulating. The weight of these small deceptions troubled me, but I wasn't ready yet. Not for the questions, the disappointment, possibly even the rejection that full honesty might bring. The park was busy with families enjoying the weekend sunshine, children chasing each other across the grass, couples walking hand in hand along the paths. I spotted Michael by the lake, skipping stones across the water's surface with practiced flicks of his wrist. He looked different outside the church context, more relaxed in jeans and a simple t-shirt, his hair slightly tousled by the breeze. He smiled when he saw me approaching, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and made my stomach flip in a way that confirmed everything I'd been feeling. You came, he said simply. Did you think I wouldn't? I hoped you would, he replied, offering me a smooth stone from his collection. Want to try? I took the stone, our fingers brushing in the exchange. The simple contact sent electricity through me, a physical manifestation of the connection growing between us. I attempted to skip the stone, but it sank immediately with an unceremonious plunk. Michael laughed, the sound free and unguarded. Here, let me show you. He moved behind me, his chest against my back as he guided my arm through the proper motion. I was acutely aware of his nearness, of his breath warm against my ear as he explained the technique. Under his guidance, my next stone skipped 3 times before disappearing beneath the surface. I turned in his arms, celebrating the small victory, and suddenly found our faces inches apart. The laughter died on my lips as our eyes met, the world around us fading into background noise. Sarah, he said softly, his gaze dropping to my lips and then back to my eyes, a question in them. In answer, I closed the final distance between us, pressing my lips gently against his. The kiss was brief, tentative, but it sent shockwaves through my entire being. When I pulled back, Michael's expression was one of wonder and longing that surely mirrored my own. I've wanted to do that since the first time I saw you, he confessed, his voice rough with emotion. Me too, I admitted, surprising myself with the truth of it. I just didn't know how to recognize it, or what to do about it if I did. He tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his touch lingering on my cheek. And now I'm terrified, I said honestly. But I don't want to stop feeling this way. We spent the afternoon walking around the lake, talking more openly than we ever had at church. Michael told me about his previous relationship, about the pain of being discovered and the rejection that followed. I shared my fears about disappointing my family, about losing the community that had always been my home. We discussed our faith, finding common ground in our belief that God's love was bigger than the boxes humans tried to put it in. As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the water, we found a secluded bench beneath a weeping willow. Protected by its curtain of leaves, Michael took my hand in his thumb tracing patterns on my skin. What are we doing, Michael? I asked, the question encompassing all the uncertainty of our situation. Living truthfully, he replied after a moment's thought. At least with each other, if not yet with everyone else. Is that enough? He considered this, his expression serious. For now, maybe it has to be. But eventually, we'll need to decide if we're brave enough for more. The reality of our situation settled between us, the potential costs, the difficult conversations ahead, the uncertainty of how our community would respond. But there was also possibility, the chance for a life lived in authenticity rather than conformity. I don't know if I'm ready for everyone to know, I confessed. My parents, the church, they have expectations. Michael nodded, understanding in his eyes. We don't have to figure everything out today. This is your journey too, and you get to set the pace. His consideration touched me deeply. In a community where men often set the terms and women followed, his respect for my autonomy was yet another reason I was falling for him. As darkness began to fall, we reluctantly parted ways, aware that too long an absence might raise questions. But before we left the shelter of the willow tree, Michael pulled me close for one more kiss, deeper this time, a promise of what might be possible between us. The weeks that followed were a delicate balance of public caution and private discovery. We created a language of subtle glances and innocent-seeming touches that communicated volumes only to us. We found legitimate reasons to spend time together: church committees, community service projects, group activities where our pairing wouldn't raise eyebrows. And in the margins of these public appearances, we carved out moments of privacy. Conversations in empty Sunday school rooms after everyone had left. Text messages late into the night, exploring each other's thoughts and dreams. Occasional meetings outside church contexts, carefully planned to avoid detection. With each encounter, each conversation, each shared secret, the connection between us deepened. I began to understand that what we were building wasn't just about attraction or rebellion. It was about recognition, about finding in another person a reflection of your own truth. But the strain of secrecy was also growing. I found myself withdrawing from family dinners, unable to engage in conversations about my future that didn't include the reality of my feelings for Michael. I became quieter in Bible study when discussions turned to traditional marriage and family values. The mask I'd worn so comfortably for years was becoming heavier, more difficult to maintain. 2 months after the picnic, the annual Harvest Festival brought the entire congregation together for a weekend of celebration. The church grounds were transformed with autumn decorations, hay bales and pumpkins, strings of lights crisscrossing the courtyard, booths selling homemade goods to raise money for missions. I was manning the apple cider stand with my mother when I spotted Michael across the courtyard, helping children with the ring toss game. He looked up at that moment, catching my eye, and the smile that passed between us must have contained too much, revealed too much. "You and Michael have become good friends," my mother observed, her tone casual, but her eyes sharp with maternal intuition. "He's nice," I replied, keeping my voice neutral as I handed a cup of cider to a waiting customer. "We work well together on the youth committee." My mother was quiet for a moment, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Sarah, you know you can talk to me about anything, right? About anyone who might be special to you." The words hung between us, loaded with implication. Did she suspect? Was this an opening or a trap? My heart raced as I considered how to respond. "I know, Mom," I finally said, choosing the safety of ambiguity. "There's nothing to talk about right now." She nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer, but I caught her glancing between Michael and me several times throughout the evening. The weight of scrutiny added to the already complex emotions swirling within me. As the festival wound down and cleanup began, Michael and I found ourselves assigned to take down the decorations in the courtyard. The late October air had turned chilly, and most families had already headed home, leaving just the dedicated volunteers to restore the church grounds. "Your mother was watching us today," Michael observed as we folded a tablecloth together, our hands meeting in the middle. "She asked if there was someone special in my life." I admitted, keeping my voice low though no one was within earshot. Michael's eyes met mine across the table. "What did you tell her?" "That there wasn't anything to talk about." The words sounded hollow even to my own ears. I wasn't ready to have that conversation. He nodded, understanding in his expression. "It's okay. These things take time." But I could see the question in his eyes, the one neither of us had voiced directly. How long could we continue like this? Living in the shadows, stealing moments, hiding what was becoming increasingly obvious, at least to us, that this wasn't just a passing phase or a forbidden thrill. This was something real, something lasting. As we finished our assigned tasks, the church grounds emptied until only a few cars remained in the parking lot. The pastor called out that he was locking up the main building, but that we should take our time with the outdoor cleanup. And then, suddenly, we were alone in the courtyard, strings of lights still twinkling above us like stars brought down to earth. Michael looked around to confirm our solitude, then reached for my hand. "Dance with me?" he asked softly. There's no music, I pointed out, even as I stepped into his embrace. We don't need any, he replied, beginning to sway gently, one hand on my waist, the other holding mine against his chest. We moved together in the quiet night, surrounded by the remnants of the festival and illuminated by the soft glow of the lights. It felt like a dream, like a glimpse into a different life where we didn't have to hide, where our love, because that's what it was becoming, I could admit that now, wasn't complicated by expectations and doctrines. I love you, Sarah, Michael whispered against my hair, the words both terrifying and exhilarating in their simplicity. I pulled back slightly to look into his eyes, seeing nothing but sincerity there. I love you too, I replied, the words feeling right, feeling true in a way few things in my life had. He kissed me then, under the canopy of lights, a kiss that felt like a beginning and a promise. And in that moment, I knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, family disapproval, community judgment, reconciling our faith with our hearts, we would face them together. The sound of a car door slamming in the parking lot broke us apart, a harsh reminder of the world we still had to navigate. But as we quickly resumed our cleanup duties, putting appropriate distance between us, I felt a new resolve forming. The Harvest Festival marked a turning point. The following Sunday, I sat with my family in our usual pew, watching as Michael led the worship team in the opening hymns. His voice filled the sanctuary, strong and clear, and when he sang about God's unconditional love, his eyes found mine briefly in the congregation. In that moment, I made a decision. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but it would be honest. Michael and I would need to have difficult conversations with those we loved, to face potential rejection and certainly misunderstanding. But the alternative, denying this connection, returning to the safety of conformity, was no longer an option I could bear. After the service, as people mingled in the fellowship hall over coffee and donuts, I found Michael by the piano, putting away sheet music. I want to tell them, I said quietly, my heart pounding but my voice steady. My parents, first, then whatever comes next. His eyes widened with surprise, then softened with understanding. Are you sure? There's no rush, Sarah. I'm sure, I replied, feeling more certain with each passing moment. I don't want to hide anymore. Not from the people who matter most. Michael nodded, respect and love evident in his expression. Whatever happens, we'll face it together. And so, a week later, I sat down with my parents in our living room, Michael beside me, our hands clasped tightly between us. The conversation was difficult, filled with tears and questions, with biblical references and expressions of concern. My father's disappointment was palpable, my mother's confusion heartbreaking. They didn't understand, couldn't understand, perhaps, how their daughter could feel this way. But they listened. And when I explained how my faith had deepened through this journey, how I'd come to understand God's love as more expansive than I'd been taught, I saw the first glimmers of potential acceptance in their eyes. Not agreement, not yet, but a willingness to try to understand. We need time, my father finally said, his voice heavy with emotion. This isn't what we envisioned for you, Sarah. But you're our daughter, and nothing will ever change that. It wasn't perfect acceptance, but it was a beginning. A foundation we could build upon with patience and love. The wider church community proved more challenging. There were those who turned away, who whispered behind hands when we passed. The pastor called us in for a conversation about our spiritual journey. His language careful, but his message clear. Our relationship didn't align with the church's teaching. But there were surprises too. Mrs. Patterson, the church secretary who had interrupted us in the library, brought us a homemade casserole and told us about her gay son in California. God loves him just as he is, she said firmly. And I believe he loves you too the same way. Some of the youth group teens approached me after Sunday school, expressing support and asking thoughtful questions about how we reconciled our faith and our relationship. Their openness gave me hope for the future of the church. 6 months after that pivotal moment behind the fellowship hall, Michael and I stood in that same spot, the garden now dormant in the winter chill. We'd come full circle, returning to where our journey together had begun. I never imagined that day would lead to this, I said, watching our breath form clouds in the cold air. That finding you here would change everything. Michael smiled, taking both my hands in his. I think maybe we were always meant to find each other, to help each other find our true selves. The path hadn't been easy, and we still faced challenges. My relationship with my parents was healing but fragile. We'd found a new church community, more accepting but requiring a longer Sunday drive. There were still moments of doubt, of wondering if the cost had been too high. But as Michael pulled me close, his arms strong and sure around me, I knew with absolute certainty that this was where I belonged. Not hiding behind masks of conformity, but standing in the light of authenticity, loved for exactly who I was. "Ready to go?" he asked, nodding toward the parking lot where our friends were waiting to take us to dinner. I looked back once more at the fellowship hall, at the church that had been both my sanctuary and my prison. "Yes," I said, turning toward our future. "I'm ready." Hand in hand, we walked away from the shadows and into the waiting world, no longer separated by fear or expectation. The gap between us finally, permanently closed. Total _char_count, 18,684.